This week, Ross Haleliuk from Lima Charlie is going to help us understand the cybersecurity ecosystem. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important for enterprise companies worldwide: cyber risk management. Traditionally, cyber risk has been managed manually in silos, separate from the business's core operations. The future is about getting real-time risk insights benchmarked against your industry peers through automation. And CyberSaint's CyberStrong platform is leading the charge. CyberStrong is not just another point solution. It's a revolutionary platform. It's a quantified top-down risk approach where your unique cyber risks inform C-suite decision-making to identify your top 5 cyber risks and the controls to mitigate them. Sign up for your free cyber risk analysis by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersaint. High-value employees have become the path of least resistance and a key source of compromise for corporations. Attacks against executives can compromise their personal accounts, enable corporate breaches, and can even compromise their reputation, wealth, and physical security. Black Cloak understands that an executive's personal digital footprint is crucial to enterprise security. We provide concierge cybersecurity solutions tailored for executives, safeguarding their personal data, devices, and online presence. Experience peace of mind knowing that your team is protected with Black Cloak Digital Executive Protection. Secure your digital life with blackcloak.io. Visit us now at securityweekly.com/blackcloak. Enterprises today are using hundreds of SaaS applications. Are you reaping their productivity and innovation benefits, or are you lost in the sprawl? Enter Savvy Security. They help you surface every SaaS app, identity, and risk so you can shine a light on shadow IT and risky identities. Savvy monitors your entire SaaS attack surface to help you efficiently eliminate toxic risk combinations and prevent attacks. So go on, get savvy about SaaS and harness the productivity benefits. Fuel innovation while closing security gaps. Visit securityweekly.com/savvy to learn more.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode 345, recorded Monday, April 8th, 2024, Eclipse Day. I'm Adrian Sanabria, standing in for Matt Alderman, and joining me today is Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
What's going on, Adrian? Great to have you. I just got back from Houston, so I was in some nice warm weather, and then came back to chilly, rainy New England. But we got a nice day for Eclipse Day, so I can't complain. After the show, I'm going to go out and see what's going on.
Very nice. Yeah, and a lot of Texas is right in the path there. I think Dallas and Austin, a lot of big cities there. I don't know about Houston, but a lot of them are right there in the path. Yeah. So it's going to be pretty cool for those folks. Yeah, lots of draft predictions and high dollar deals in the news.
I know.
What do you do in the off season? Do you watch that stuff, or do you go on to other sports?
Well, actually, I've been deep into March Madness right now. So tonight we have UConn, so I'm going UConn all the way.
April Madness.
I wanted to double up.
It all extends. It's so funny. Like I remember when the Super Bowl was in January. It's April Madness now.
I know. And it's soccer season for my son, so we just kicked into spring soccer season. So we had some games this weekend.
Very cool. Yeah, we've been checking out some games here locally. Orlando Pride, the women's team here, is a lot of fun to go see. My girlfriend managed to catch a ball in the face.
Oh no! Hopefully she's okay.
We sat behind the goal, so like she even set her drink down. Like every time they come towards us, she'd set the drink down, ready for it. Yep. Still, man, those ladies can kick. Oh, yeah. It came too fast. All right, a few announcements here before we launch into the interview. On the evening of Monday, May 6, 2024, W2 Communications and Cyber Risk Alliance are bringing Cyber Tacos back to San Francisco. This is during RSA, at RSA. If eating free tacos, sipping on margaritas, and mingling with cyber professionals from all over the world sounds good to you, make sure to register to secure your spot. You can visit securityweekly.com/cyber tacos to RSVP today. We'd also like to invite our listeners to be part of the prestigious 2024 SC Awards. Entries are officially open, and the SC Awards continue to serve as a beacon of excellence, recognizing the industry's best solutions, organizations, and people that are advancing information security. This year, there are 34 categories. Speaking of cybersecurity ecosystem, a lot of categories. Many updated to reflect trends in artificial intelligence, cloud security, and continuous threat exposure management, which is what I understand happened to BAS, breach and attack simulation. This is your chance to shine among the brightest in the cybersecurity world. Take advantage of the early bird rate by April 12th. Visit securityweekly.com/SC Awards to submit your entries by May 31st. All right. And with that, today we are talking about the cybersecurity vendor ecosystem with Ross Haleliuk. Ross is the author of the very popular book, which I've got right here, Cyber for Builders, the essential guide to building a cybersecurity startup. Very interesting book that's come out of anybody who knows Ross has probably seen his posts on LinkedIn. Very engaging posts, a lot of interesting conversations there. It's my favorite kind of social post because it really gives you some insight into what people are thinking. He's also head of product at Lima Charlie, which has a cloud-based SecOps system. And a lot of other people know Ross through his newsletter, Venture and Security. Welcome to Business Security Weekly, Ross.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, so section 2 of your book, Understanding the Cybersecurity Ecosystem, isn't exactly about what we're going to start out talking about. I think you get a lot more into the different players in the ecosystem. And the book, as the name implies, is very focused on the entrepreneur's perspective, the founder, the builder's perspective. But here, because this is Business Security Weekly and the audience is largely the buyer side, we're going to be a little bit more on that side with our discussion today.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So yeah, when we were doing our prep call, Ross, and we have a lot of interesting conversations, you threw out one of the greatest quotes. You said, running a security program is often confused with shopping. Jason, I just want to get your take on that, your reaction.
As someone who's a practicing CISOs for quite a while, you're absolutely correct in saying that. I mean, the product landscape in cybersecurity right now is like walking into a Costco or walking into, if you're from New England, a BJ's wholesaler and looking up on the shelves at all of these different products and all of these different aisles with all of these different, outcomes that you could achieve by buying them. And the landscape is confusing. It's in many instances, it's shopping blind. It's shopping, looking for products that, claim to solve an outcome, so claim to solve a problem or give you an outcome. But how do you necessarily trust that without going through iterations of testing or iterations of conversation? To the point from, my perspective as a buyer, someone who held the purse strings, you would recruit your teams to go out there, full-fledged teams, and say, go do a bake-off for me because I need to know where I can properly invest the limited amount of funds that I have. And not to mention that bake-off has to have a time bomb because my folks have jobs to do, right? The folks on my team have jobs to do, not be doing bake-off. So it's a very, very complicated ecosystem and landscape of tools and products and services, all saying they're going to solve every problem that you have, obviously. But, getting that trust factor is very difficult and making a choice is very difficult. So yeah, it's a zoo out there. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I would even take your Costco analogy a bit further and say if you have a meal in mind, if you know what you're planning to cook, then going to Costco can be a great experience because you can find low cost, high quality items and assemble the stack that you need. But if you don't have anything specific in mind, then you're just going to go and buy a ton of ingredients which like individually look fantastic, right? But once you start to bring them all together, like what do you do with like chicken and Oreo cookies? Like there is not much you can do.
That's right. And honestly, that's why these ecosystem manufacturers now who are coming to the table with already a prefab ecosystem is much like the Hungry Man meal, the pre-built meals for you. You can walk in the door and say, all right, well, I know I'm going to get my protein. I know I'm going to get my carbohydrates. I know I'm going to get a piece of everything. And so many organizations are moving away from that that individual product and moving more to the ecosystem approach, because it's like getting that pre-cooked meal for you that you can already be handed, right? So if we're going to keep with the food analogy, it's making it a little bit easier on the buyer. The question is, does it give you the value and the outcome in the end?
Yeah,
I love that analogy so much, Ross, because it's so relatable. Like just like shelfware, like having the stuff in the back of the fridge that you discover a month after it expires, or back in the pantry, it's gone stale, or gone past a date. I don't know how adventurous folks are with. I mean, those dates are basically meaningless. They're just there's no science behind those dates
Yeah.
whatsoever. But still,
Yeah, and
like
Adrian, you just sparked something for me. Adoption, right? It's almost like
right.
going in and eating the first bite of the burrito and then sticking it back in the freezer, because so many organizations aren't adopting the technologies and products that they have.
Shelfware.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
it's
just
still a
taking
big
that first
problem.
bite. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember back at 451 Research, we did Javad did most of the work. I helped him out with this report. Javad Malik, who's over at KnowBe4, we were at 451 Research together, and it was fascinating to see, because we surveyed both the buyer side and the seller side and asked them, why do you think shelfware is a thing? Why do you think people are buying your products and then not using them? And there was a whole bunch of finger pointing on both sides. It was really interesting to see the reasons, the excuses, that they come up with, or at least from their perspective, the reasons that they legitimately think people are not using the products, or they're not using the products after they buy them.
I would be actually quite curious to see if over time, if over the past, let's just say 10
Mhm.
years, we have started to see less shelfware instead of more shelfware. And the reason I would make that assumption would be because the buying cycles are becoming shorter and shorter. So every year and a half, new startups come in and say, "Hey, why don't you start replacing this thing that you already have in your stock?" So even if you have never adopted it fully, there is already, a 2.0 version of the same tool waiting
Yeah,
outside of the door and saying, "Hey, you have to upgrade. You have to
Right.
upgrade.
yeah.
It's here."
But to
I
that point, Ross, wouldn't you say, if they didn't adopt the original technology, going in and buying the new blinky light or the new tool isn't going to solve the problem? They're just refreshing a product and not necessarily getting to the outcome that they want. Because maybe that new tool they're not going to adopt until it's a new refresh cycle. That's a scary part. That's why I like looking at adoption rates, because adoption rates can help show how integrated that solution could be into the business.
Yeah, there is that piece, but there is also the part that once a company already has an experience with a specific software, it eventually reaches the point when it becomes disappointed in different parts of that
Mm.
experience. And that's just inevitable, right? It doesn't matter what tool you're using. There are going to be gaps. There's going to be something that you wish you would be able to do, but unfortunately you can't. And I think over time, like newer startups, they identify those gaps and they solve for those specific problems while introducing new ones which the previous tools didn't have. But because buyers are so used to keeping in their memory the few specific points that really drive them nuts, they're looking at those parts and they're missing the whole other side of the problem.
Yeah.
And you make a good point with introducing new problems. That's a point I definitely want to make here. Is just well, first of all, the amount of labor that goes into it. Jason, you were talking about doing a proper test of products. Whether you say POC or POV, whatever your favorite acronym is, a ton of work goes into that, and then just figuring out how to get these products functional and producing value and keeping them there. Just the maintenance, the overhead with the products, a lot of labor there as well. And then the and yeah, I forget my first point, but yeah, labor is a huge component of this. And going back and looking at shelfware, I all the top categories that became shelfware were all the most labor heavy products. So it wasn't very surprising. It was products that had a lot of false positives, created a lot of busy work for employees to do. So I think it's in security, especially, it's very difficult to figure out what the efficacy rate is of a product, because that does require figuring out if it's working or not, if it's producing value or not. So these are abstract concepts that you have to somehow put metrics to. You have to somehow measure these, without having a breach, right?
Yeah, and I think the part that gets missed most often is the maintenance cost, and it's the amount of effort needed in making sure the tools are not just deployed initially, but also that they stay up to date. Like I have heard a ton of anecdotes saying that, hey, we've implemented this tool X, only to realize a year later that only about 25% of its detections capabilities were actually enabled, and the rest
Mhm.
the rest required somebody to go into the settings and toggle a bunch of different options manually, and knowing which of those options have to be toggled on. So I think the part that gets forgotten is that from the point the tool is initially adopted, uh, it only starts to degrade. Like over time, as vendors add new capability, as vendors start to add like additional features, expand their products into larger platforms to offer more coverage, customers start to lose the connection with that product, because nobody is sitting there and looking over 40 or 50 different tools and reading the release notes from different vendors. So there is a lot of work that has to go into keeping the tooling up to date. In fact, there has been a report. I don't remember which company or which entity produced it, but there is a report out there stating that the vast majority of the security breaches could have been prevented by the very tools companies are already paying for. So the problem
Yeah.
isn't the lack of new tools, the problem is the implementation of
Yeah.
the existing tooling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And well,
sorry. So I was just going to say real quick, like this is this is where I spend most of my time on the side researching, doing postmortems on stuff, and that's exactly what I found. I've never done one of these postmortems into breaches and come to the conclusion that they just needed more stuff from Palo Alto, and this
mhm.
could have been avoided. Almost every case, it's misconfigured stuff. It's bad processes or missing processes. People not understanding how to use the stuff, how to connect it all together. But yeah, bad implementation is a big part of it. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jason.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, some of the pressures on the security team though is the ability to have enough personnel to do the caring feeding over time. Because
Yeah.
many of those folks on the team are doing multiple jobs, right? They're not just the person running the product or tuning the product or managing the product or doing the maintenance on the product. They may be an analyst at the same time, right? They may be a manager of a team. They may be on the offensive security team or embedded in another business unit helping them with security. So the struggle is from a CISO's perspective is the budget doesn't allow, and we don't have enough time in the day to be able to have product SMEs who know that product, only that product, and are absolute experts on the product.
Yeah, and
Yeah. And
ideally, go ahead,
go
Adrian.
ahead, Russ. You were
Yeah,
going to
and
say
I
ideally.
Yes, and ideally, vendors would understand those dynamics and would try to design products in such a way that best practices get propagated by default, instead of requiring some additional effort from the security team to configure. Uh, in the same way, the vast majority of the security tools out there do not make it easy to configure products using API, or using some
Mhm.
other like more scalable options. Instead, somebody has to go manually, like screen by screen, and toggle on a bunch of different knobs and buttons, which makes it incredibly hard to scale. And as the company grows, as the environment becomes more and more complex, like that management layer, like it starts to require more and more
Mhm.
investment, and it just becomes impossible to justify that investment.
Yeah, and then you need, yeah, think about it. How many security tools does your average security team have? 20, 30, 40 tools maybe,
Yeah.
right?
What's the ratio per employee?
Right, exactly. And how can you expect to have experts, or at least folks who are skilled enough to be able to truly adopt the power of those platforms? You can't, and again, I said it earlier. A lot of organizations are moving to that more ecosystem approach where you have one manufacturer who has these multiple tools, because at least now it's one environment you have to be trained in. You're just learning the modules across the environments, and it's not all of these silo tools. So there's economies of scale that you can realize there, right? From a training perspective and a configuration perspective. But the question is there a risk in quality now? right? So it's really weighing both sides of the aisle and saying, with the point solutions, I needed to have an expert in each one of those point solutions. Moving over to and we weren't able to achieve that. We can't get an expert in all of those. Will moving over to an ecosystem approach be beneficial or not?
Yeah, and
Yeah, and
the other
it's interesting. We've seen a swing between products that are like super powerful because you can do anything you want with it. And that tends to be like the response to, oh, do you have a parser for this, or an integration with these guys, and the response will be, oh, we've got an API. You can do anything you want. Assuming that the buyer has this team of really smart and skilled people who know exactly what detections to build, how to use the product, how to write Python, how to integrate these different things. And oftentimes that's not the case. Like configurability is not what they're after. They need it out of the box to do some useful stuff already. So we've seen, like, I think XDR was kind of that was one of those moments where we saw it kind of move towards, what, we've got a team of detection engineers here at Palo Alto. They'll build a bunch of detections for you and constantly keep building and deploying those detections. And I think that's a lot of what I was seeing in the market. Like, there's very few companies. They're like, yeah, just give me, a data platform and we'll build everything on top of that.
Yeah, and there are trade-offs at the end of the day. You need a tool that will provide some kind of a baseline coverage so that the security team does not have to build like the fundamentals, the basics from scratch. But at the same time, you need the ability to extend that coverage in a way that is custom to individual organizations' environment. And what I find is that the majority of the tools in the market, they tend to either serve one segment or the other. So they're either incredibly advanced, where you have to build everything yourself, or they are, they're sort of pre-built, pre-assembled in such way that if you wanted to extend the tool, you simply don't have the ability to do so.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, and then for again, as on the buyer side, it's like a unicorn. Then you do find this great tool. You leverage the tool. Your team begins to start adopting the tool and being successful. Then all of a sudden they become part of an acquisition. And in
Mm.
many instances, they go off to the place where companies go to die, right? Because we all
But
know that there are some companies that
yeah,
acquire
we know
others
the names.
and they go off and die, right? So that's there's the blessing and the curse. That's the curse, because ultimately you can find a great platform, a great tool, then all of a sudden an acquisition happens and ruins it all for you.
So I've got a question for each of you before we hit the break here, because this is going to be for listeners. This is going to be a two-parter here, and we've just got so much ground to cover. We had to make it a two-parter. But so, question for you first, Jason. How do you, talking about, you've got to have some folks who are SMEs in a
Mhm.
product, but how do you avoid the flip side of that? Like, I've gone into a lot of organizations, tried to help a lot of organizations where all you have are product SMEs, of
Yeah.
tool SMEs. Like, they don't actually do any security analyst work or security engineering, or they don't ever really think strategically about it. They come to work, they
Right.
log into whatever tool they've been assigned, and that creates busy work for them. They click around and they
Mhm.
log out and they go home. They never think about the bigger picture, or
Right.
whether those what they're doing day in day out has
Mhm.
any impact whatsoever. How do you avoid that?
Yeah, I think for our team, it's about making sure the diversity in their skill sets is there, right? So number one, there will never be all eggs in one basket where you have a single subject matter expert in a product. It's always going to be something that's spread across members of the team. So there's multiple
So you
people.
actively try to prevent that?
One 100%, absolutely.
Yeah.
I actively try to prevent having all eggs in one basket, no doubt about it, because when you can share the wealth across teams of knowledge, right? Now all of a sudden that person isn't 100% focused in that product. Then you start adding in the diversity of making sure that they're integrating into the business, right? So a lot of folks on the team are making sure they have relationships with clients of ours
Mhm.
or within other departments of ours, learning the business. It's really making sure that the responsibilities of those team members are beyond a product and
Right.
about business outcomes and integrating to the business.
So that's where their perspective comes in, is their exposure to other parts of the business.
That's
And
right.
yeah, okay,
100%.
makes sense. And then the question for you, Ross, we're already deep into, I'd say, over a decade into this territory where we have security products that exist to fix problems that other security products introduce. So tons of examples here. There's the firewall management products, which I think there were only ever 4 or 5 of these, like the Firemons, the AlgoSecs, all those guys that manage all your firewalls for you, because maybe you've got 5 different brands of firewalls across your varied infrastructure. You've got the give us all your vulnerability management data and we'll prioritize it for you. The risk-based vulnerability management stuff. You've got the security analytics vendors where step one is give me access to all your SIM data, and I'll find useful things in there for you. So you're going to buy the SIM, which promised this already, and then you got to buy something else. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, is that just inevitable in the ecosystem to end up with these kind of tiered layers, or is that indicative of a bigger problem? Like, I'm not sure if you look outside infosec if other industries have this problem.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question, and I think a lot of it, like a lot of the problems, stem from the fact that there is a large number of cybersecurity startups, but there is actually a fairly finite number of security problems. Like, we like to think that that isn't the case, but like if you look at the fundamentals, like the problems that an average security leader is worrying about today are fairly similar to the problems they were worried about 5 years ago. We're still talking about endpoint, we're still talking about network, we're still talking about cloud, like we're still talking about identity. It's still the very same like core fundamental problem areas. And so the challenge is that every startup is trying to find a wedge and is trying to find an angle to tackle those very same problems from. And uh, when I picture a specific market, like let's just say I don't know, let's not even name what market that what
Okay.
market it would be, and instead just talk about it conceptually. Let's just say there is a market and about 100 cybersecurity startups that are trying to tackle that market from different perspectives. Eventually, a company is going to adopt one or two of the tools that are out there. But there is another 98 tools that do genuinely add value in a way in which the two that were adopted don't. And so it does become this Swiss cheese model where you add one vendor hoping that it is going to be able to catch the gaps and the bugs that the other vendor missed. Like, is it going to be fixed by simply introducing more of the ecosystem level players? I don't know if that's the case, primarily because what we call ecosystem level is often an assembly of the individual point solutions that were acquired and integrated into one platform. Hopefully they were integrated, because it's not uncommon to also buy 5 different modules from the same vendor, only to realize that those modules don't actually talk to one another, and you still need to do a ton of work to make them do. Is it solvable? I do believe it is, but I do believe that the vast majority of security problems are solvable if people choose to tackle them from the first principles. And that does require placing big bets. That does require adding the services component, which I think has been largely neglected. Like, when we look, like, even in this conversation, we are mostly discussing cybersecurity products, while the reality is that uh, the vast majority of organizations would largely benefit from a product plus service offering. And that service offering is incredibly important. Like, the fact that cybersecurity teams lack talent to introduce and implement different tools means that you cannot build a magic tool that will automatically adjust to every customer's environment, but you do need some people to come in and say, okay, here are some of the problem areas you should be paying attention to. Here are some of the options out there. So I think the problem we're discussing here is solvable. I'm optimistic about what the next several years are going to bring, but I don't believe the solution is going to be just products or just AI or just services. I think it's the combination of all of those that will have to earn its place under the sun.
I 100% agree with you, Ross. I think the foundational problems that we've had over the course of the last 15, 10, 5 years, you name your number of years, are very similar, if not exactly the same. I think the only things that have been changing are the pressures coming from outside, right? regulatory pressures, third-party vendor risk pressures, pressures from your board, pressures from your CEO. And I look forward to talking about this in the next segment, because I think a lot of those pressures are causing either knee-jerk reactions, quick decisions, and not necessarily taking the time and thought to create a good program and a good framework for your cyber team. In turn, bringing good product and good services into your environment. So I look forward to the next segment. I really want to dive deep into that.
Cybersecurity and knee-jerk reactions, like bread and butter.
Yep.
All right. As Jason was alluding to, we're going to pause a little bit for some ads. We're going to take a quick break. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just a moment.